Hello, and welcome to our webinar about the research data services available from Dois for scientific communities. My name is John Favreau of Trust IT, and I am the Director of Communications at the Dois project. Today, we'll be showcasing 4 of the Dois services available for different scientific communities. We're going to present solutions for finding, sharing, storing, and publishing research data. We want to encourage European researchers to take advantage of these and other digital services being made available free of charge by the European Commission. So without further ado, I'd like to present now our first speaker, Antti Pursula, who will give us an overview of how you can acquire the Dois services. Antti, I'll now turn over the floor to you.
Okay, so thank you for the possibility to present here and welcome to all the participants to this webinar. So my name is Antti Pursula. I'm the work package 7 lead in the Dois project. So this is the work package that coordinates the service provision under this virtual access mechanism. I'm also the head of secretariat of the EU.data infrastructure. So I'll be telling you briefly about the Dois project and especially on how in practice one can request to access these services. So Dois project, the long name is Data Infrastructure Capacity for IOSC. It is a European funded project which has a target of enabling European storage and data management services for communities and for researchers in Europe. And it is part of the European Open Science Cloud initiative. So there comes the acronym IOSC. The project features 18 service providers from altogether 11 European countries who are providing these services within the project to users. Yeah, and the duration of the project is 2.5 years. So it runs until the summer of 2023. This slide introduces the consortium members. So the main part of the project is formed by the service providers, and these are 18, as I mentioned, all over Europe. Several of them are part of the EU.data infrastructure, but not all. There are also other state-of-the-art data services included. On top of the service providers, the project also includes participants from the user communities on so-called use cases to really take advantage and pilot of the services, and then partners for outreach and sustainability. So what are actually the services that we are talking about here? We have made a classification of data management services into 5 categories, which are now visible on this slide. I can introduce them very briefly. So there are data discovery services, which is basically for example, a metadata search portal and that type of services. In data repositories, we provide services that enable fair storing of data. So this is something where one can store and share and publish data sets. Then there are 2 different flavors of data archives. The policy-based data archive has a let's say management layer on top of the storage, which then allows value-added services such as replicating the data, staging it to computing, integrity checks, persistent identifiers, and so on. And then there are data archives, which are basically the pure archive to store research data. And finally, there are so-called personal or project workspaces, which is basically a cloud service to store, share files and directories. So it's ideal for small teams or projects, or even larger teams to collaborate on active data. So there are actually, in total, if you count the volume or petabytes, how much storage is available. So that's a large amount of storage, more than 50 petabytes together. And we also have a goal that when someone asks for a service from Dois, that if it's a standard request, doesn't need modification in the services, that we aim to serve the customer within 2 weeks. Also, we have possibility in the Dois project to support customized solutions, meaning that we do some kind of tailoring or customer-specific modifications or integrations, and this to some extent can also be supported in Dois. So certainly something that you should ask if interested. The services can be requested through many routes. The one that our funder, the European Commission, prefers is to go to the EOSC marketplace, European Open Science Cloud Marketplace, and filter resources with the provider Dois, and then you get the listing of services that are available. It is also possible to send email to EU.helpdesk, or even contact directly your, let's say, local service provider and discuss the case. So there are several ways of requesting the service. So how to access in practice? For most of the categories, for most of the services, you can already find them in the EOSC marketplace. And I would say that the rest of them will be added within the next months or within the next weeks, so that they are there by the end of this year. And for example, this figure on the slide shows the start of the listing in the marketplace. So for example, you can go there, click B2 Access and start discovering what is the offering, or B2 Drop or any other of these services. So really final slide of my very brief introduction is about the continuous use of the services. So indeed, these services are free of charge for users, and this is thanks for the European funding. Of course, it is known that for data services and storing data, it is often there is need to commit for larger or longer time than 2.5 years. And what we can say is that the services are basically expected to continue also after the Dois project. It's of course up to the service provider, but the understanding is that the services will continue. However, the EU funding is ending at that point, so there may be then, or probably there are fees then on the usage after the project. We don't know what happens in the European landscape, if there is a centralized funding mechanism or not, but I think it's good to understand that it may be a something that needs to be done under a contract after the Dois project. If this is a point that is puzzling you, then I think it's good to discuss with the service provider. So if you go and order a service and add there a question or comment that we would like to discuss what happens after 2.5 years, then we are happy to do that. It really depends on the service and the service installation and the provider. But I would say that most of these services are actually part of the EU.data infrastructure, which is a consortium of more close to 30 data centers or providers of services. So this also brings kind of additional guarantee that the services are not just disappearing after the project period, but these are really aimed to be sustained services. Okay, this was actually the final slide. I hope this gave you a brief overview of what the Dois project is about and what type of services we have available, and also how you can start taking benefit of them. And then I hope that the next presentations will give you further details and understanding of some of these services, that how they can be used and what kind of purposes are that you can take benefit of them. Thank you.
So now we'll move on to the main body of the webinar, which is the 4 presentations on various aspects of the Dois services. We'll hear from Helena about DOI registration with DataCite, and then from Nadia about data storage with HSM. And then after that, we'll hear from Chris on data publishing with B2 Share. And finally, we'll hear from Claudia Martins about data discovery with B2 Find. So we have 4 presentations coming up now to look forward to. So let's get started now with the first in line, which is Helena. I will now unshare, and you can start sharing your slides. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, John. Let me share my screen. 1 second. There we go. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Helena. I am DataCite's Director of Community Engagement, and really happy to be part of this webinar today. We're very excited to be participating in the Dois project and have the opportunity to offer DOI registration services through the project. So I hope that this will be useful to some of you, and in my brief talk today, I will give an overview of the service we provide and also how you can apply for this opportunity and get in touch. So yeah, do let me know if you have questions at the end of the Q&A, or feel free to follow up afterwards. So as I said, I work for DataCite, and for those of you who don't know DataCite, we are a non-profit global membership organization. We work with over 2,000 repositories around the world to provide DOIs for research data and other research outputs. And as I guess you can tell from the name DataCite, DataCite was founded because there was a need for persistent identifiers for research data, but over time that has expanded. And so now our members also register DOIs for other types of research outputs that sit in repositories, often in institutional repositories. And our vision is to connect research to identify knowledge through persistent identifiers. And so how that works in practice, the building image that you see on the screen is representing a research institution. And at research institutions, many different types of outputs are being generated. And if these just sit on a researcher's computer or an external hard drive, they don't really become part of the research ecosystem. If the project then ends, the outputs are just kind of disappearing. Whereas if the outputs are deposited into a repository and a persistent identifier is registered, then through the accompanying metadata, the different outputs can become connected. So for example, data to articles or to the software that was used to generate or analyze the data. And also through the metadata, the outputs become discoverable, can be found by other researchers, can be reused to answer other questions. And that reuse can then also be tracked based on the identifier. And that information feeds back into the institution. So there are 3 ways in which institutions can register DOIs. So one option is to have an integration with our API to automate DOI registration. So that requires some time at the start, but then it really simplifies DOI registration. But what many members also do, especially if you're registering lower numbers of DOIs or you don't have development resources, is to use our manual interface. So we provide an interface where you just log in with your credentials and where you can enter metadata, click a button and register a DOI. So that is a very easy process to get started with. And we also work with a number of what we call registered service providers. So these are platforms, for example, DSpace or Dataverse, and they already have a DataCite integration. So when you use one of these platforms, you only have to switch that on and you can use your own credentials to register DataCite DOIs. Now, there are a number of reasons why organizations decide to join DataCite to start registering DOIs. One is to make outputs discoverable. DataCite metadata are harvested by many different organizations, so that way the outputs appear in more places, can be more easily found by other researchers. Another reason is to follow best practices. Of course, FAIR is really important. I'm sure we'll hear more about that today. And persistent identifiers play a really crucial role in FAIR. So having an easy way to register a persistent identifier really helps with that. And as I said, tracking is very important, knowing where the outputs associated with an institution sit, because these can sit in different places, and how these are connected to all the different entities within the research lifecycle. So as I already said, we work with over 2,000 repositories in 48 countries, so really globally. And something that I think is important in this context is we work with over 1,000 organizations, but we have 245 members. And that is because there are two types of membership. Organizations can join as a direct member to just register DOIs for their own organization. But we also have consortia, where an organization provides DOI registration services to other organizations. And so some of these members function as consortia, and therefore the number of organizations is larger than the number of members. And that is also relevant in this DICE context because of how we set this up. So here you see what the consortium structure looks like. So there's a consortium lead, and that consortium lead provides the DOI services to other organizations. And so there are several organizations underneath that can be 5 or 150. And then these organizations have their own repositories, and that can be 1 or more repositories. And every repository has its own prefix for DOI registration. And so within the DICE project, EUDAT leads this consortium. So if you apply to participate in this opportunity, you join the EUDAT consortium. So you become a consortium organization in the EUDAT consortium, and you can then set up your own repositories underneath, 1 or more repositories with your own prefixes. So yeah, that brings me to what to do if you're interested. And I will also paste these links in the chat when I stop sharing my screen, because I imagine you don't want to type these into your browser. But you can find us on the EOSC marketplace. So the DataCite DOI registration service is registered there, listed there. And then if you're interested in this opportunity, you can submit the inquiry form on our website. And then we contact you to schedule a call. And if you want to move forward, then we will set up your consortium organization account in our system and show you how you can add repositories and start registering DOIs. Well, Antti already mentioned, it's very important to also discuss what happens after the project, after the DICE project ends. So when the DICE project ends mid-2023, we will give you until the end of 2023 to evaluate your options, because we realize it takes some time to figure out what's best for you. EUDAT intends to continue the consortium, but then the normal fees will apply. These can be found on our website. So that is one possible scenario. It's also possible, if you really got into it, that you apply for your own direct membership, or if there's a national consortium you want to work with, it's also possible to transfer your repository account to that other consortium and to continue registering DOIs there. And if you do not want to continue, and of course we hope you will continue, because for persistent identifiers, it's quite important that they're managed over time and not just left alone. But if you don't, then your account becomes inactive, but the DOIs continue to resolve. So yeah, that was my brief overview. As I said, please feel free to get in touch if you have questions or want to discuss your options, and I will share the links in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. So remember to look in the chat for extra information. And at this point, I should also say that we do intend to share the slides to make the slides available. So if you miss it on this time around on the chat, you will be able to also get a hold of the slides and find the information that you're looking for. So thank you very much again, Helena. And now we would like to move to the next speaker, who is Nadia Tonella from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, who will talk about data storage with HSM. Nadia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. I will share my slides with you. Can you see it?
Yes.
Great. So I'd like to present you the service that we are offering to the Barcelona Supercomputing Center. I'm Nadia Tonello. I'm head of the data management group at BSC, but I'm also collaborating with the DICE project, coordinating the group of use cases inside this project. So as the name indicates, the Barcelona Supercomputing Center is mainly offering supercomputing services through open calls with praise, but also nationally with the Spanish supercomputing network. It is worth to mention that it is not just a supercomputing center, it is also a research center. We have 4 research departments in computer science, life science, earth science, and engineering applications. And because of that, we have also a huge system for storage that is connected not only to the supercomputer, but also to cloud storage. We are offering this storage both at national level with the, inside the codes of the supercomputing network, but also with DICE to any researcher in Europe and beyond that wants to access part of this storage. The way of accessing it is what it has been mentioned before through the EOS marketplace, but I have to say that most of the requests we get them directly. I will talk about it in a moment. So the main characteristics of this storage at BSC is to be multidisciplinary, and so it is open to any kind of scientific data and that can be hosted here. The system that is managing the storage is a hybrid system. It has a huge tape library behind a disk front end, and this hierarchical system for management it permit to be very flexible and scalable. It is connected, as I told before, to, both to HPC and cloud computing. And we have also already deployed a couple of UDAT services. So there is not only HSM pure storage, but also policy-based storage like B2Safe and just for BSC collaborations also B2 Drop. We can talk about it also later or in the QA question session. So as a practical example, I do not want to go in detail, but we are also collaborating in DICE with a use case. So at BSC, we are hosting one of the use cases that deploy B2 Safe that is connected to the B2 Safe instance at SURF in the Netherlands, and another service that is B2 Share at UCL. So this is just an example to show that there is a success story that is going to be presented, and it has been already presented in another webinar, to show an concrete application of the storage provision that we give through Dois. So I'd like to show you what we are offering in detail through virtual access. It is 500 terabytes per day of HSM storage. It is a mid-long-term kind of storage connected to computing. The typical project size is between 10 and 100 terabytes, but it can be also lower. The size, it depends on the HSM system itself, but it is possible also to provide B2 Safe if under request. The virtual access is granted until the end of the Dois project, and you can directly request it to data management at bsc.es or through the common channels of Dois at the IOSC marketplace. But what happens after the Dois project? We can still offer, and we will continue offering, for of course, pure storage or data services, or also storage and computing for data exploitation. The main mechanism for BSC is giving it through peer-reviewed mechanisms. So it can be as for supercomputing, applying at praise calls. It can be calls also for data projects. For Spanish researchers, we offer the Spanish supercomputing network calls for data projects. But in general, for European researchers, it can be asked also through Phoenix ECI project, or also to any other EC mechanism for virtual access or UDAT that researchers may access. So this is briefly what I wanted to present you. Is just an example of one service provider of the Dois storage. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer at the final session. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Nadia. So now we have seen two examples of different aspects of the Dois services. The last one we saw, of course, was the core service of data storage. Now we're going to move on to see another couple of services that are about different aspects of what is being offered in Dois, including some services that have been mentioned previously. So next we're going to hear from Chris Ario from CSC, who will talk about data publishing, and the service offered is B2 Share.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I am Chris Ario. I'm from CSC IT Center for Science. I am the EU.CDI B2 Share service owner. So I'll be talking a little bit about B2 Share. So the overview, B2 Share service, and then how to get support. So this is the EU.CDI data domains. So we are in the shared and the published area. That's B2 Share. So, and in the EU.B2 services suite, you can see where we are situated right in the middle of the pile there, connected to B2Find, where you can do data discovery. And in perspective, if you look at the data life management context, you'll see where we are also found. So what is B2Share? B2Share is a user-friendly repository where you can store data, share it, and then you preserve it on a small scale for a much longer, and who can use B2Share? B2Share are meant for researchers, students, citizen scientists, as well as small teams and communities. Then why do you need to use it? When you have your research, then you'll be able to make your data, register your data for publication. That means you make it fair, you make it known in your community, wider, in even outside your own community. You put in metadata that will make it possible for people to understand what you have done and be able to, create reproducibility of the research. We assigned Dois, PIDs, and we check the data checksums, and then periodically to make sure we still have data and it's consistent. We have download statistics on the object level, dataset record, lifetime and versioning, authorization, metadata automatically harvested by B2Find, and we support annotation via the B2Note. So if your metadata is not enough, then you can, from inside B2Share, to add more information using B2Note. And during the cooperation, when you have your B2Drop and you have your data that you are cooperating with others, you can directly upload your data into B2Share from B2Drop, either from B2Drop itself or from B2Share to pull it using what we call the B2Drop bridge. And it's easy to install your own local version if you want. How do you use it? You register from b2share.eu.eu. You register using your domain through B2Access. And then how do you deposit data? When you have registered, all you need to do is just create a new record. Put a title, select a data domain or community, and then you can create a draft with your metadata. So this is a basic, the base of the technology that was used. So we have the B2Share persistent ID based on Invenio, which is developed by CERN. And this is an example of a B2Share screen capture, where you can, when you log in, then you can create your record, choose your community, create your record, and create a draft record that you can publish when you are ready. So if you need support, we have several levels of support. End user support we have through the helpdesk.eu.eu, where you just send your ticket in and then we look at it. And then we have the first level support, which is basically for the communities to help you. And on the top, the final, if you run into major problem, then our developers can look into the situation and try to help as much as possible. Any questions? And before the questions, I would say that as usual, you can get this service from Dois marketplace, EOS marketplace, sorry, and then you can use it with the Dois. Any questions? We'll wait until we have finished, and then questions I will answer as soon as we start then. Thank you.
And thank you, Chris. Yes, questions, please start sending your questions in the chat or in the Q&A tab so that we can answer them during the Q&A session. So we have one last but not least, presentation to hear from. This is Claudia Martins, from DKR Zeta. And this will be yet another perspective on data services within Dois. This time we'll be talking about data discovery with B2Find.
Hi. Yeah, as you said, I'm from the DKZ, which is the German Climate Computing Center. So there are some similarities with the Barcelona supercomputing, but we are more specialized on climate. But we also host the EU data service B2Find, which is basically an interdisciplinary search portal. It's specifically for research data. It's also for other research output, but mainly we really focus on data. It was developed within the EUDAT project 1 and 2, so it's already compared to other European projects quite old, which means we have a lot of experience what works and what does not work. What is special is that we are interdisciplinary in all respects. So it means B2Find basically is a joint metadata catalog. And it comprises all kind of data on all levels of granularity using all different formats and belonging to very divergent research areas. And this is really challenging, I think is the term. We do collect metadata from EUDAT data centers. We certainly do enable the findability of B2Share records, but we also have lots of other communities that are represented in B2Find. How it works. We have communities, that's what we call the data provider. We do harvest them. We harvest the metadata. We do a very, very cool mapping. We upload the results from the mapping to our search portal, and there researcher and everyone can search for research data. Now, a bit more concrete. We do harvest via OAI-PMH. This is the Open Archive Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting. That's specialized for metadata harvesting. That's why it's called metadata harvesting. It's actually quite old, but it's stable, it works, and it's reliable. We do harvest from CSV, which is the catalog service for the web, very often used in spatial communities or communities using geospatial data. But we also include any best RPs. So we do, may retrieve metadata even when there is no generic endpoint like an OAI endpoint. Sparkle queries are only possible in a beta version, so not really done easily now, but will be in the future, of course. We support metadata standards and schemes, of course, the generic ones, which is Dublin Core, and of course, DataCite, the most important generic metadata schema for research data. We do support OpenAIRE. The main difference from OpenAIRE to DataCite is that OpenAIRE also supports records that do not have a DOI, but any other PID. And same is valid for EU.core, which is the metadata schema for EU.data services. The core is mainly the metadata elements that are used by B2Find. There is also an EU.data extended scheme, which is for specific metadata in B2Share, which enables communities to have more metadata created than only the core, but extended to even more specific ones. We do support DDI2, 2.5 currently, which is a very important generic standard for social science metadata. And we do support ISO 19139 and, oh, that's a typo, I'm sorry, it's ISO 19115 and 139, which is the INSPIRE, more or less the INSPIRE directive used for geodata. FGDC is a kind of crosswalk from those geodata to Dublin Core. And as we include REST APIs, as I said, we do include very specific community metadata schemes. The mapping is I'm sorry, I have to move this Zoom stuff. We do a technical mapping, a semantic and a specific. It takes too long to explain everything we do, but the point is it is very, very specific to each community. And as our code is very flexible, it allows that we can add for each endpoint, for even sometimes within an endpoint, different ways of specifying the metadata, even more concrete than it is within the already given metadata schema. And we have a search web GUI where you can search for data. And I guess, or I suggest you just try it out whether it works for you. One more specific thing I would like to mention is our way to integrate B2Share records, because we are a catalog, and so far as we are collecting metadata, but we are also a metadata aggregator, as our metadata are already harvested by OpenAIRE. So every metadata record that is stored in B2Find and searchable in B2Find is automatically also findable in OpenAIRE. Now, the way from B2Share to B2Find goes this way. When you have a instance of B2Share, let's say at CSC in Finland, and we have another instance, let's say at Forschungszentrum Jülich in Germany, both of them have a subset called EUDAT, where people can store metadata records or research data in general, and then creating metadata records for that. But there are specific more communities within the one instance. Then it works in a way that those subsets are combined and findable in B2Find within one subset, which is called EUDAT. But if you have a community within B2Share, this community is automatically integrated as a community in B2Find. We have those, let's say, EUDAT internal communities, but of course, as we said, we have a lot of others. Those are only 5 examples. Up to now, we have, I think, 48 communities under out. So really very diverse areas for research in general. All of them are exposed to OpenAIRE, are harvested by OpenAIRE. Due to an OAI PMH extension for our software used for the web interface, which is also open source software, of course, and the communities themselves are shown as, let's say, subsets in OAI, so they could even be harvested one by one. Fortunately, as we are at the end of the whole line, we don't need some reliable things. I mean, if you want to have your data integrated in B2Find and be findable, searchable in B2Find, then you just write a request via Dois or via EUDAT. I will send, as Helena, these links in the chat. And if your metadata are in B2Find, they stay to be there in B2Find and won't disappear. So we have, after Dois ends, B2Find still exists, so nothing will happen. Yeah, so far from my side.
So thank you so much, Claudia. I think you made some very important points that we'd like to get to now in the Q&A session. So please start writing your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So now we have arrived at the possibility to have a few questions and answers. This will be co-moderated with my colleague Nadia Tonella, who is the community manager at Dois, as she has said. So she has a lot to say on this, about these issues. Claudia, I see that we do have a question in the chat. Maybe you'd like to take that first?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just, if Marike wants to speak up, I don't know if she can, but or he can, but I can read the
Yes.
question here. How does Dois's data repository B2Share compare with Zenodo? And regarding sustainability, what is the time horizon for data retention after the project ends? So for B2Share, I don't know.
I would suggest Chris is answering, right?
Yes, I would also suggest that.
I would try to answer. Basically, we compared to Zenodo, we use the same code base. So Zenodo uses also Invenio, and we use Invenio. And sustainability after the project is that it's going to be made available, but as it's already said, is that payments might be, needed to continue the depending on what type of service we are providing for you. Because basically in Dois we have 3 types of services that we can provide for B2Share. One is the basic, without any changes, and then the second one is I'll call it standard, where we can make changes to your community, make some small changes, and then the third one is what we call I will call it extended here. So in which case that is we can tailor it to what you want. That tailored version of B2Share, you have your logo, you have whatever you want, and the login restrictions and whatever you want. We can do that. So depending on each one, we are going to look at discuss at the end of the project and see, okay, how do we go forward from there? I hope this answered your question.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much. Okay, I would like to get to a question that has come up several times. One is, how specific are the services to the specific communities that are being represented? Because we are reaching out to many different kinds of scientific communities. Claudia, I think you indicated in your talk that very much is done to make it relevant to the specific community that is using the service. Is that the case? So you actually try to develop, you end up having to develop a personal relationship, so to speak, to the community and exactly what their needs are.
Yeah, the question is what a community is, right? So you have different data provider, and you have within, let's say, for instance, the geo earth environmental community, you have so many sub-communities because marine science is something different than atmospheric sciences, and they again relate to some astro people. So the aggregation level is very, very different. And what actually B2Find enables is really very concrete, specific harvesting and mapping channels, because we do talk to people and we test it. We try to make everything as automated as possible, which is why we do support so many metadata standards. But if there is no metadata generic or even community-specific metadata standard used, then we just take the specific one which is there. That requires a lot of work. And this is still human work. It is not yet the way that everything is done by a computer and all APIs are automatically generated and exchanging information. This is not the case. So for data curation, our work is, I think important. And that is done in Dois specifically, because each integration of each community data provider, data infrastructure, research infrastructure, harvesting endpoint, however you want to call it, is done specific to the needs of those provider. And I think that's an advantage. And I would like to mention to what Chris said, what is regarding Zenodo and B2Share. B2Share enables really the community-specific metadata elements on top of a generic part that is always exchanged and always findable in B2Find and in OpenAir, and probably in the next OpenAir Explore version as well, and is But additionally, you can set up your own metadata schema for up to 99, I think. And that's an advantage because it enables you to make it specific for your needs.
Antti, I think you had a comment.
Well, yes, thank you. But basically, Claudia managed to say all of that, but I can still elaborate. So regarding the thematic services, so basically it's unique combination in the sense that EUDAT services and also others in Dois are in principle generic services. So they apply for all science areas and science disciplines. But then we have this possibility of customizing them towards the community needs, just exactly as Claudia explained. And in the DICE project, we have use cases where this is done to comp biomed, to, the life sciences, environmental sciences, and so on. So these services really are flexible in that sense.
Perhaps you could expand on that 1 second. The services are generic, and in fact, you showed at the beginning of your talk that there were quite a few providers, and there may very well be multiple providers for a single service. Is it possible to choose your provider, or do you just take what they give you?
Indeed, it is possible to choose. So in the ordering form in the EOSC marketplace, there is one optional question of selecting the preferred provider. So, for example, B2Share that Chris presented. So there are let's say the central B2Share from EUDAT is provided from CSC Finland, but there are B2Share instances in several places in Europe. So, for example, a user or a community often might want to use the instance that is closest to them. So maybe that creates you better opportunity for collaboration, or you already know the persons there. So certainly one can request to have a, let's say, local provider.
Excellent.
So there is a final question that maybe is also for Antti. They ask, do you have an estimate of the fees for the different services that will be one have to pay after the project ends? Difficult question.
It is a difficult question. We have started to collect this information and analyzing it, but it's really difficult to give any generic response or guidance on this, because the services are different, the installations, how they are actually provided, they are also different. So it depends on the actual provider of that particular service and the instance. But this is also a topic that we are happy to discuss with each community separately. So, for example, if the person asking this question can contact us and tell which service it is about, or maybe even ask here, then we can start to narrow it down to some estimates.
Great, thanks so much. Well, we're coming up to the end of the hour, and we want to respect all of your tight schedules. It seems that these days everybody has a new meeting starting at the beginning of the next hour, so we wanted to take some time to be able to say goodbye. And thank you to all the speakers. Thank you so much for all the information. The recording will be available on our website after this, so look out for that. We will also make the slides available to those of you who participated and those of you who were not able to come. We appreciate your coming. Look out for other webinars that are coming, and of course, we hope that you will partake of the DICE services very soon. So thank you, and all the best to everybody. Have a great day.